Sis, I maxed out your credit cards to buy my dream house. Sarah's voice bubbled with excitement through my phone speaker. Mom and Dad said you'd understand. You've always been the responsible one, and now it's my turn to have something nice. I stood in my small studio apartment, staring at the credit alert notifications lighting up my phone screen. My name is Emma Thompson, and at 29, I'd spent the last decade building my credit score to near perfection. Every payment on time, every debt carefully managed, all while working my way up from intern to senior financial analyst at Morris & Wade investment firm. Congratulations, I replied, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. When's the housewarming party? This Saturday. You'll come, right? I mean, you kind of have to. You basically bought it. Sarah laughed, that same carefree laugh she'd had since childhood, the one that always seemed to excuse her actions in our parents' eyes. After hanging up, I sat down at my small kitchen table, opened my laptop, and began assessing the damage. Sarah had somehow gained access to all 3 of my credit cards, maxing them out to their collective limit of $45,000. The charges were all from the same day. A massive down payment on a house in the suburbs, the kind of place I'd been carefully saving for while living in my cramped studio. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. Emma, honey, don't be upset with Sarah. She really needed this. You know how hard it's been for her since she quit her job to focus on her influencer career. This house will be perfect for her content. I closed my eyes, remembering all the times my parents had justified Sarah's behavior. When she borrowed my college fund for her failed boutique venture, when she took my car and totaled it, leading to my insurance being canceled. Each time, the refrain was the same. Be understanding, Emma. Sarah's following her dreams. You're the stable one. You can handle it. But this time was different. This time, I had proof and a plan. What Sarah didn't know was that 6 months ago, after she tried to take out a loan in my name, I'd installed security cameras in my apartment. I had footage of her breaking in, rummaging through my desk, and finding my credit card information. I also had emails from my parents warning me that Sarah might need to borrow some money and urging me not to make things difficult. More importantly, I had something else: leverage. My position at Morris & Wade wasn't just about analyzing investments. I'd spent years building relationships with real estate developers, understanding market trends, and quietly laying the groundwork for my own investments. The house Sarah had just bought using my credit. It was part of a development project I'd been consulting on. The real estate agent was my colleague's wife. The property manager was my former college roommate. As I scrolled through my phone, another message popped up, this time from Sarah's Instagram. Dreams do come true. Can't wait to show everyone my new home at Saturday's housewarming party. #bliss, #new chapter, #dreamhouse. I smiled, screenshotted the post, and added it to my growing file of evidence. Then I made 3 calls, one to my lawyer, one to the real estate agent, and one to accept the invitation to Sarah's housewarming party. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah's social media was filled with photos of her shopping for furniture, picking out curtains, and posting inspirational quotes about claiming what you deserve. My parents called several times, alternating between guilt trips and attempts at rationalization. Emma, you need to sign these papers for Sarah's mortgage, my father insisted during one call. It's just a formality. You know she's good for it. Of course, Dad, I replied. I'll bring everything to the housewarming party. We can take care of it all then. The day of the party arrived bright and sunny. I parked my modest car among the luxury vehicles lining the suburban street, watching Sarah flit from guest to guest in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Our parents stood proudly by her side, beaming as she showed off the granite countertops and custom cabinetry. Emma, Sarah squealed when she saw me, rushing over for a hug as though she hadn't just committed credit card fraud. Isn't it amazing? I can totally pay you back once my lifestyle blog takes off. Mom and Dad said you're fine waiting, right? I hugged her back, feeling the expensive fabric of her dress. Actually, I have something for you. A housewarming gift, you could say. Sarah's eyes lit up. She'd always loved gifts, especially when they came at someone else's expense. Really? You didn't have to. I mean, you already helped with the house. She giggled, gesturing at my maxed-out credit cards. Oh, but I insist, I said, reaching into my bag. In fact, Why don't we gather everyone around? Mom, Dad, could you join us? I think the whole family should be here for this. My parents exchanged nervous glances but made their way over. They knew that tone in my voice. It was the same one I'd used when I discovered Sarah had stolen my college fund. The one that meant I wasn't going to quietly clean up her mess this time. As a small crowd gathered, drawn by Sarah's excited squeals about a surprise gift, I pulled out a thick manila envelope. Sarah, you always say family helps family, right? That we should share our blessings. She nodded enthusiastically, already reaching for the envelope. Totally. That's why I knew you wouldn't mind about the credit cards. We're sisters. Well then, I said, my voice carrying across the marble-floored foyer, let me share something with you. I opened the envelope and began removing its contents, laying them out on the elegant entryway table one by one. The security camera footage of Sarah breaking into my apartment, printed in clear, color photos. The credit card statements showing the fraudulent charges. The emails from our parents conspiring to use my credit. The Instagram posts where Sarah bragged about her new house, helpfully time-stamped and notarized. And finally, the piece de resistance, documentation showing my connection to the development project, the real estate company, and most importantly, the property itself. Sarah's face shifted from excitement to confusion to horror as she realized what she was seeing. Our mother gasped, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. Our father started to speak, but I held up my hand. I'm not done, I said calmly. There's more to my gift. I pulled out the final document, a letter from my lawyer outlining exactly how much trouble Sarah was in for credit card fraud, identity theft, and breaking and entering. The letter also detailed my parents' liability for aiding and abetting these crimes. You see, Sarah, I continued, my voice clear in the now silent room, when you decided to borrow my credit cards, you didn't just commit fraud. You did it to buy a house in a development where I'm an investor. Every document you signed, every form you submitted, every piece of paperwork you forged, it all crossed my desk eventually. The color drained from Sarah's face as the implications sank in. Our mother stepped forward, already launching into her familiar defense. Emma, you're being dramatic. Sarah just needed a little help. No, Mom, I cut her off. What Sarah needs is to face consequences for once in her life. And what you and Dad need is to stop enabling her. I turned back to Sarah, who had sunk into one of her new designer chairs, her perfect housewarming party crumbling around her. So here's what's going to happen. You have two choices. Either you can face criminal charges for fraud, which, given the amount of money involved and the clear evidence I have, will likely mean jail time. I paused, letting that sink in. Sarah's eyes were wide with fear now, her earlier bravado completely gone. Or, I continued, you can sign these papers. I pulled out another set of documents. They transfer the house to me, its rightful owner, since it was my credit that paid for it, and include a confession of your fraud along with a payment plan for every penny you stole. You can't do this, Sarah whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. Mom, Dad, tell her she can't do this. Our parents stood silent for once, perhaps finally realizing they couldn't fix the situation with guilt trips and family obligations. The other party guests had quietly moved to the edges of the room, watching the drama unfold with a mix of shock and fascination. Actually, I can, I replied. And I am. You have until the end of this party to decide. Choose wisely, sis. With that, I picked up my bag and walked toward the door, pausing only to take one last look at the house Sarah had thought would be her dream come true. Oh, and Sarah, consider this the last gift I'll ever give you. Family helps family, right? The sound of Sarah's sobs followed me out the door, but for the first time in my life, I didn't turn back to fix her mess. Sometimes, the best gift you can give someone is the chance to finally face reality. The next morning, my phone erupted with notifications. Sarah had spent the night posting tearful Instagram stories about family betrayal and forgiveness, carefully crafting her narrative to paint herself as the victim. Each post was more dramatic than the last, complete with carefully filtered selfies showcasing her mascara-stained cheeks. I sipped my coffee, watching the family drama unfold on my screen. My parents had called 17 times since I left the party, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Emma, please, my mother's latest message pleaded. We can work this out as a family. Sarah made a mistake, but she's your sister. Think about what this will do to her future. I thought about my own future, the one I carefully built while Sarah coasted through life on family sympathy and second chances. The security footage of her breaking into my apartment was still open on my laptop, a stark reminder that some mistakes weren't just mistakes, they were choices. My lawyer, Diana, called around noon. "The papers are ready," she said, her tone professional but with a hint of satisfaction. "Has your sister made her decision?" "Not yet," I replied, "but she will. She's never faced real consequences before. The threat of jail time should be enough tow." A sharp knock at my door interrupted me. Through the peephole, I saw my father standing in the hallway, his face set in the stern expression he used throughout my childhood when laying down the law. "I'll call you back," I told Diana. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. "Dad." "Emma," he said, trying to look past me into the apartment. "We need to talk about this ridiculous situation with your sister." "Ridiculous?" I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling credit card fraud now?" He shifted uncomfortably. "You know what I mean. Sarah's devastated. She had to take down all her social media posts about the house. Her followers are asking questions. This could ruin her influencer career." "Her career?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Dad, she committed multiple felonies. Her career should be the least of her concerns right now." "Don't be dramatic," he started, but I cut him off. "You want to talk about dramatic? Let's talk about the emails you and Mom sent encouraging Sarah to borrow my credit cards. Let's discuss how you plan to have me sign mortgage papers under false pretenses. Should we call Diana and review the legal implications of conspiracy to commit fraud?" The mention of my lawyer made him pause. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. "You wouldn't really press charges against your own sister." "Why not?" I met his gaze steadily. "She wouldn't really steal from her own sister, right? You wouldn't really help her do it, right?" He ran a hand through his graying hair, and suddenly he looked older, smaller somehow. The authority figure who had always sided with Sarah, always found a way to excuse her behavior, was finally facing the reality of their choices. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "I want Sarah to sign the papers," I said. "I want her to take responsibility for once in her life, and I want you and Mom to stop enabling her. And if we don't—" I pulled out my phone, showing him the folder of evidence I'd compiled. "Then I let the law handle it. Your choice, Dad, just like it was your choice to help her steal from me." He left without another word, but I knew this wasn't over. Sarah had never accepted consequences gracefully, and our parents had never stopped trying to shield her from them. Sure enough, by evening, Sarah launched a new offensive. She showed up at my office, tears flowing perfectly down her cheeks, dressed in a somber outfit that probably cost more than the credit card payments she'd never made. "Emma, please," she sobbed as my colleagues tried not to stare. "I know I messed up, but I can't go to jail. What about my followers? What about my brand?" I led her to a private conference room, maintaining my composure even as she continued her performance. "Your brand?" I asked quietly. "You mean the one you built while living rent-free with Mom and Dad? The one you financed with stolen money and family guilt?" "That's not fair," she protested. "I'm trying to build something. You've always had it so easy. Your perfect job, your perfect credit score. Some of us have to take risks to succeed." "Risks?" I opened my laptop, pulling up the security footage. "Is that what we're calling breaking and entering now? Taking risks?" She fell silent, watching herself on screen as she rifled through my desk, triumphantly holding up my credit card information. "Here's the thing, Sarah," I continued, my voice level. "I don't care about your brand. I don't care about your followers. I care about justice. You stole from me, and now you have a choice to make. The papers or the police. It's that simple. Mom and Dad will never forgive you for this." She tried one last time. "Maybe not," I agreed, "but I'll never forgive them for what they've already done. Ball's in your court, sis. Choose wisely." After she left, I received a series of texts from our mother, each more guilt-laden than the last. "Your sister is crying herself to sleep every night. How can you be so cruel to your own family? We raised you better than this." I finally responded with a single message. "Yes, you did raise me better than theft and fraud. Pity you didn't do the same for Sarah." That night, as I reviewed the transfer papers with Diana over a video call, she pointed out something interesting in the property records. "Your parents took out a second mortgage on their house last week," she said, Right after Sarah used your credit cards. Let me guess, I said, the pieces clicking into place. They were planning to help her pay off my cards slowly, hoping I wouldn't notice the charges until it was too late. Exactly. They were in on this from the start, Emma. This wasn't just Sarah being impulsive. This was a calculated family decision, one that deliberately excluded you. I thought about all the family dinners I'd missed because I was working late, all the vacations I'd skipped to build my savings, all the times I'd heard Emma will understand when Sarah needed something at my expense. Send me everything you have, I told Diana. Every email, every document, every record. It's time my family learned that understanding doesn't mean accepting abuse. As I ended the call, my phone lit up with a message from Sarah. No tears this time, no manipulation. Just 2 words that told me she'd finally understood the gravity of her situation. I'll sign. The signing was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Diana's office. I'd arrived early, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as dark clouds gathered over the city skyline. Appropriate weather for what was about to unfold. Sarah showed up exactly 13 minutes late, our parents flanking her like bodyguards. She had traded her usual designer outfits for a simple black dress, playing the part of the repentant sister. But I caught the familiar gleam in her eye, the one that usually meant she had an ace up her sleeve. Before we start, Sarah announced, pulling out a folder of her own, I have something to show Emma. Diana started to object, but I held up my hand. Let's see what she's got. Sarah spread several documents across the conference table with theatrical flair. Remember when you helped me start my first business, that boutique that failed? Well, I kept every paper you signed, including this. She pointed to a document bearing my signature. You agreed to be a guarantor for all my business ventures, past, present, and future. So if I go down for fraud, you're coming with me. Our mother smiled triumphantly. Our father crossed his arms, looking pleased for the first time since the housewarming party. I picked up the paper, examining my signature carefully while Sarah continued her speech about family loyalty and mutual destruction. When she finally paused for breath, I looked up at Diana and nodded. Show them, I said quietly. Diana opened her laptop, turning it to face my family. On the screen was a video from 6 years ago, security footage from my first apartment. It showed Sarah at my desk, practicing my signature over and over, getting better with each attempt. I knew about the forgery, I said, my voice steady. I've known about every document you've faked in my name, every signature you've practiced, every scheme you've planned. Why do you think I installed cameras in the first place? Sarah's smug expression cracked. You're bluffing. This isn't. October 15th, 2019, I cut her off. You broke into my apartment while I was at work, used my computer to print blank contracts, and spent 2 hours perfecting my signature. I have it all on video, just like I have footage of you stealing my credit card information last week. I turned to her parents, who had gone very still, and I have every email you sent encouraging her, every text message planning how to hide the theft, every piece of evidence showing this wasn't just Sarah acting alone. This was a family conspiracy. Why didn't you stop her? My mother whispered. If you knew all along. Because I needed to know how far you'd go, I replied. I needed to understand if there were any limits to how much you'd let her take from me. Apparently, there weren't. Diana cleared her throat, sliding the real transfer papers across the table. Your attempt at blackmail has been noted and added to our evidence file. Now, shall we proceed with the original agreement, or would you prefer to take this matter to court? Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the papers. The fake documents she brought lay forgotten, her failed power play hanging heavy in the air. Sign them, our father said suddenly, his voice gruff. Sign them and let's end this. Dad, Sarah turned to him in shock. But you said. I said we try it your way, he cut her off. It didn't work. Sign the papers before your sister decides jail time is better than a payment plan. I watched as Sarah's world crumbled around her. The sister she'd thought she could manipulate, the parents she'd expected to fix everything. The schemes she'd always relied on, none of them were working anymore. With shaking hands, she picked up the pen. Her signature was nothing like mine, messy, uncertain, real. As Diana notarized the documents, my mother made one last attempt. Emma, please, we can still fix this as a family. Sarah will pay you back slowly. We'll all work together. No, Mom, I said firmly. We're far past that now. This isn't about money anymore. This is about consequences. What do you want from me? Sarah asked quietly, looking younger than I'd seen her in years. I want you to grow up, I replied. I want you to learn that actions have consequences, and I want you to understand that family doesn't mean being a doormat for abuse. I gathered my copies of the signed papers, nodding to Diana. The house will be listed for sale next week. The proceeds will pay off my credit cards and cover the legal fees. Whatever is left will go toward your debt. You have 5 years to pay back the rest. And if I don't? Some of Sarah's defiance had crept back into her voice. Then I take everything. The evidence goes to the police, your influencer career becomes a cautionary tale about fraud, and mom and dad face charges as accessories. Your choice, just like always. Only this time, I won't be around to save you from the fallout. As I walked out of Diana's office, I heard my mother start to cry and my father try to comfort Sarah. But for the first time in my life, their pain wasn't my problem to fix. The clouds had broken outside, sunlight streaming through in bright shafts. Looking up at the clearing sky, I felt lighter than I had in years. Sometimes the heaviest chains are the ones we forge ourselves, link by link, in the name of family obligation. I've finally broken free. 1 year later, I stood in front of the house that had started it all. The sold sign swayed gently in the spring breeze, a fitting end to this chapter of our family saga. The sale had exceeded expectations, clearing my credit card debt and leaving Sarah with a smaller balance to repay. My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. I made this month's payment early, just wanted you to know. It was a small thing, but significant. Over the past year, Sarah had made every payment on time, taken a real job at a marketing firm, and slowly begun building a life based on actual work rather than manipulation. Losing the house and facing the threat of legal consequences had finally forced her to grow up. I typed back a simple "received, thank you," and slipped my phone into my pocket. Our relationship would never be what it was before, too much had been broken. But at least now, it was honest. My parents had gone through their own transformation. The first few months after the signing were rough, filled with guilt trip attempts and tearful voicemails about family loyalty. But when they realized I wouldn't budge, something shifted. I've been seeing a therapist, my father told me during our first coffee meeting in 6 months. She's helping me understand why we enabled Sarah for so long, why we put so much on you. My mother took longer to come around. Last week, she left a message that still played in my mind. I'm sorry, Emma, not just for what happened with Sarah, but for every time we made you feel like your boundaries didn't matter. You deserve better. Diana had kept all the evidence files just in case, but we hadn't needed them. The threat of consequences had proven more effective than the consequences themselves. The house's new owners were a young family with 2 kids. Sometimes I drove by and saw them playing in the yard, making the home their own. It felt right somehow. The house that was supposed to be Sarah's influencer backdrop had become someone else's genuine dream. My own life had changed too. The promotion I'd been working toward came through, partly because of how I'd handled the investment property situation. You showed excellent judgment and risk management skills, my boss had said. That's exactly what we need in a chief investment officer. I used part of my new salary to buy a small but elegant condo overlooking the city. No security cameras this time. I didn't need them anymore. The people who might have betrayed me had learned their lesson. Sarah's influencer career had taken a hit when she suddenly went quiet about her dream house. But she'd adapted. Her new content focused on financial responsibility and learning from mistakes. Ironic, but at least it was authentic. Your sister's latest post actually made sense. My colleague James mentioned during lunch. The one about how family love shouldn't require sacrificing your self-respect. I'd seen the post. Sarah had written about our situation without naming names, admitting her mistakes and sharing what she'd learned. The comments were filled with similar stories of family financial abuse and the courage it took to stand up to it. Today, standing in front of the sold house one last time, I felt closure. My phone buzzed again. A calendar reminder for dinner with my parents tonight. We'd started having monthly dinners, just the 3 of us. No Sarah, no drama, just slowly rebuilding trust. They were different now. Their blind support of Sarah had been replaced by a more balanced understanding of family dynamics. They'd even started paying back their share of the money they'd helped Sarah steal without being asked. We want to make it right, my father had said. Not just the money, but everything. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the car window. I looked stronger somehow, more certain. The woman who had let herself be used in the name of family obligation was gone, replaced by someone who understood that real love didn't require self-sacrifice. My mother had asked me recently if I regretted pressing charges, if I thought I'd been too harsh. I told her the truth. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their actions. Sarah had needed to learn that lesson. So had they. I started my car, taking one last look at the house in my rearview mirror. The sold sign caught the afternoon light, glinting like a promise kept. A year ago, this house had symbolized everything wrong with my family: the theft, the lies, the manipulation. Now it represented something different: the courage to stand up for yourself, even when it hurts. As I drove away, I smiled. Sometimes happy endings don't look like what we expect. Sometimes they look like boundaries enforced, lessons learned, and new beginnings built on honest foundations. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Diana. Dinner next week. I'm thinking of writing a book about financial abuse in families. Your story could help others. I typed back "count me in" as I headed home. After all, the best revenge isn't just success. It's using your experience to help others find their strength, too.